My mother spent $30,000 on a painting that night. We all thought she'd lost her mind. Turns out, she'd been hiding something far worse. You think you know your family. I certainly did, until a single item at a charity auction became the catalyst for an unbelievable exposé. This wasn't just about money, it was about generations of hidden deceit that ripped our carefully constructed facade apart. The ripple effects will astound you. I never thought I'd be the person writing one of these posts. I always read them, scrolled through them during my lunch breaks, judged them quietly in my head, thinking that would never happen to me. But here I am, sitting in my apartment at 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, needing to get this out because if I don't tell someone, I think I might actually lose my mind. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what happened 3 weeks ago at the St. Jude's annual charity auction, an event my family has attended religiously for the past 15 years. And when I say religiously, I mean it. My mother would rather miss Christmas than miss this auction. She'd circled the date on the calendar every year since I was 12, marked it in red pen with little stars around it. It's our duty to give back, she'd always say, wearing that serene smile she reserved for moments when she wanted to appear saintly. My family isn't wealthy, not by the standards of some of the people who attend these events. We're comfortable. Upper middle class, I guess you'd call it. My father runs a successful accounting firm. My mother works part-time at an art gallery downtown. My older brother, Marcus, is a real estate attorney. And me. I'm a high school history teacher, which probably makes me the poorest one in the family, but I love what I do. Or at least, I did. It's hard to love anything right now. The auction is always held at the Grandview Hotel, this gorgeous old building with crystal chandeliers and marble floors that echo when you walk across them. Every year, it's the same routine. We get dressed up, my mother in whatever designer dress she's been saving for the occasion, my father in his best suit, and we go as a family. We bid on items, usually modest ones, a weekend getaway package, a signed sports memorabilia, maybe a nice piece of art. We write our checks, take our photos with the charity organizers, and go home feeling like we've done our part to make the world a better place. This year started no differently. It was November 2nd, a Saturday evening. The weather had just started to turn cold, that kind of crisp autumn air that smells like dying leaves and wood smoke. I remember because I'd worn my new navy suit, the one I'd bought specifically for parent-teacher conferences, and I was worried it wouldn't be warm enough. We arrived at 7. The auction didn't start until 8, but my mother always insisted we come early to mingle, which really meant she wanted to see and be seen. She wanted people to notice that the Harrison family was there, that we cared, that we were pillars of the community. Looking back now, I see it differently. I see it for what it was. The ballroom was already half full when we walked in. Round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of white roses and gold ribbon, soft classical music playing from somewhere I couldn't quite locate. Wait staff circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. My mother grabbed a glass immediately, my father declined. He never drank at these things, said he needed to keep a clear head for bidding, and Marcus and I each took one just to have something to do with our hands. Quite the turnout this year, my father said, scanning the room with that analytical look he gets when he's assessing a situation. Should drive the prices up nicely. I saw the catalog online, my mother said, her voice bright with excitement. There are some truly spectacular items this year. Did you see that Tuscany Villa Week? Marcus, you and Jennifer should bid on that. You two need a vacation. Marcus laughed. On an attorney's salary? You overestimate how much I make, Mom. Oh, nonsense. You're doing wonderfully. She patted his arm, then turned to me. And you, sweetheart? Anything catch your eye? I shrugged. I'm just here for the free food and the good cause. She gave me that look, the one that said she was disappointed but trying not to show it. You should take these things more seriously, Daniel. Networking is important, even for teachers. I didn't respond. I'd learned a long time ago that arguing with my mother about my career choices was pointless. She'd never quite forgiven me for not going into law or business, for choosing a profession that she viewed as noble but impractical. We found our table, number 7, near the front. The auction began promptly at 8. The auctioneer was a man named Gerald Hutchins, mid-60s, silver-haired, with a voice that commanded attention. He started with the smaller items, building momentum. A basket of wine and cheese. A set of golf clubs. A day at a local spa. My family sat quietly through most of it. My father made a single bid on a fishing trip package but dropped out when the price hit $500. This was their pattern. They watched, they waited, and they struck when they found something they deemed worthy. About an hour in, the big-ticket items began rolling out. A vintage Rolex. A week in Bali. Original artwork from a local artist who'd recently made it big. The energy in the room shifted. And then, item number 47 was brought out. I'll never forget the moment I saw it. 2 staff members carried it carefully to the front, placing it on a display stand under a spotlight. It was a painting medium-sized, maybe 3 feet by 2 feet, in an ornate gold frame that caught the light. The painting itself was stunning, a landscape, rolling hills at sunset, done in oils with incredible depth and richness of color. Ladies and gentlemen, Gerald announced, we have something truly special here. This is an original work by Thomas Whitmore, dated 1923. For those unfamiliar with Whitmore, he was a prominent American landscape painter in the early 20th century, and his works are highly sought after by collectors. This particular piece, titled Autumn in the Valley, comes to us courtesy of an anonymous donor and has been authenticated by the Hanover Institute of Art. The starting bid is $10,000. A murmur went through the crowd. People shifted in their seats. A few paddles went up tentatively. 10,000. Do I hear 11? 11,000 from paddle 32. Do I hear 12? The bidding moved quickly. 12, 13, 15. It stalled for a moment at 17, then jumped to 20. And then my mother's paddle went up. 22,000 from paddle 7. I turned to stare at her. My father's hand had moved to her arm, but she shook him off gently, her eyes fixed on the painting with an intensity I'd rarely seen. Mom. Marcus said quietly. That's a lot. It's for charity, she said, not looking at him. Another paddle went up across the room. 23,000 from paddle 18. My mother's paddle shot up again immediately. 25,000. Now people were starting to pay attention to our table. I could feel eyes on us. My father had gone very still, his jaw tight. This wasn't like my mother. She bid carefully, strategically, never emotionally. But there was something about the way she was sitting, leaning forward slightly, her knuckles white around the paddle, that told me this was different. 26. Someone else jumped in. 30,000. My mother's voice rang out clearly, and I heard a few gasps around the room. The other bidders dropped out. Gerald scanned the room, his eyebrows raised. 30,000 going once, going twice, sold to paddle 7 for $30,000. Applause broke out. My mother sat back, a strange smile on her face, somewhere between triumph and relief. My father was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. Elizabeth, he said quietly, but she waved him off. We can afford it, Richard. Don't make a scene. But something about it felt wrong to me. The way she'd bid so aggressively, so unlike herself. The amount, $30,000, was more than we'd ever spent at any of these auctions combined over 15 years. And most of all, the look on her face. Not joy, exactly. Not pride in having won something beautiful. It was relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. The auction continued, but I barely paid attention. I kept glancing at my mother, who sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead with that same strange smile. My father had pulled out his phone and was typing furiously. Marcus caught my eye and raised his eyebrows in a "what the hell was that?" expression. After the auction ended, people came up to congratulate my mother on her purchase. She accepted their compliments graciously, but there was something off in her responses. She kept touching the pearl necklace she wore, twisting it between her fingers, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. We collected the painting at the checkout table. My mother signed the paperwork, my father wrote the check with visible reluctance, and we carried it out to the car. The drive home was silent. Not the comfortable silence of a family tired after a pleasant evening, but the heavy, thick silence of unspoken tension. I sat in the back with Marcus, both of us texting our respective partners about the weird evening, neither of us daring to break the quiet. When we got to my parents' house, my father and Marcus carried the painting inside and propped it up in the living room against the mantel. My mother stood back, her arms crossed, staring at it. "It really is beautiful," I offered. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, it is." $30,000 beautiful?" my father asked, and there was an edge to his voice. "Richard, please. Not tonight." "When, then? When would you like to discuss the fact that you just spent $30,000 on a painting without consulting me?" "I didn't need to consult you. It's our money, and it's for charity." "That's not the point, and you know it." I exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Maybe we should go." "No," my mother said sharply. Then, softer, "No, please stay. I'd like us all to be here together." There was something in her voice that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We sat down in the living room. My mother poured herself a generous glass of wine. My father declined. Marcus and I accepted. "So," my father said, "are you going to tell us what that was about?" My mother took a long sip. "I wanted the painting. Obviously. But why? Can't I just appreciate art?" "Elizabeth." My father's voice was firm. "We've been married for 35 years. I know when you're hiding something." She looked at him for a long moment, then at Marcus and me. "It's a long story." "We've got time," Marcus said. But my mother shook her head. "Not tonight. I'm tired. Let's just enjoy what we did for charity." She stood up and headed upstairs. We heard her bedroom door close firmly. My father sat there for a moment, staring at the painting. "Something isn't right. Should we be worried?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father look uncertain. "I honestly don't know." Marcus and I left shortly after. In the car, he finally spoke. "That was weird, right?" "That was definitely weird. Mom's been acting strange lately. Jennifer mentioned it last month." Said Mom seemed distracted, kept checking her phone. He dropped me off, and I went inside, poured myself another drink, and sat on my couch trying to process the evening. Something about the whole situation nagged at me. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up and opened my laptop. I started with Thomas Whitmore. Born in 1885, died in 1952, known for his landscape paintings. His works were indeed collectible. Prices at auction typically ranged from $5,000 to $50,000. So my mother's bid of $30,000 wasn't completely unreasonable. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. I looked specifically for Autumn in the Valley. Nothing came up. No auction records, no museum listings. Then I thought about the authentication. The Hanover Institute of Art. I looked it up. It existed, a small private institution in Connecticut. Their website was professional, their credentials seemed legitimate. But I kept digging. I found their database of authenticated works. It took me a while to navigate, but eventually, I found their entry for Autumn in the Valley. Authentication date, October 15, 2025. Less than 3 weeks ago. Submitted by Anonymous. Authentication fee, $12,000. I stared at that number. $12,000 for authentication. Added to $30,000 for the bid. $42,000 total. Why would someone spend $12,000 to authenticate a painting and then donate it anonymously? Unless you needed it authenticated for a specific reason. unless you needed it to appear legitimate. I felt sick. I told myself I was jumping to conclusions, being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Over the next week, I couldn't let it go. I drove by my parents' house twice, making excuses to stop in. The painting had been hung in their study. Every time I saw it, I felt that same nagging sense that something was wrong. My father pulled me aside during one visit. "Have you noticed anything off about your mother lately?" "Off how?" "Secretive. She's been spending a lot of time in the study with the door closed. When I ask what she's doing, she says she's just admiring the painting." He looked troubled. I tried to talk to her about the money again, and she just shut down. "What are you thinking?" "Daniel, I've been doing some checking. The anonymous donor who submitted the painting? The paperwork trail is complicated. Multiple shell companies, offshore accounts. Whoever donated this went to a lot of trouble to hide their identity." "How do you even know that?" "I'm an accountant, and I have friends who specialize in forensic accounting. I asked one to take a discreet look." He rubbed his face. "I don't want to believe your mother is involved in something shady, but the more I look, the more questions I have." That conversation haunted me. I decided to do some investigating. I called the charity office, pretending to be interested in making a donation. "The Whitmore painting from the recent auction," I said casually. "That was incredible." "Oh yes. The donor was very specific about wanting it to go to our cause. They actually approached us specifically, which was unusual. Through an attorney, actually." "An attorney." Marcus was an attorney. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. That evening, I did something I'm not proud of. I drove to my parents' house when I knew they'd be out. They had theater tickets. I still had a key. I let myself in, feeling like a criminal. The painting hung in the study. I stood in front of it, studying it. If it was a fake, it was an incredibly good one. I looked at the back. There was a small paper label with the Hanover Institute's logo, a verification number, and a date. I took a picture. Then I started looking through the study. The filing cabinets were locked. The desk drawers had mostly boring financial documents. I was about to give up when I noticed my mother's laptop sitting on the side table. On impulse, I opened it. Password protected, but I knew my mother. She used the same password for everything. I typed it in. It worked. I felt sick, knowing I'd crossed a line, but I was too far in now. I opened her email first. Nothing unusual. Then I checked her browser history. Art websites. Auction results for Thomas Whitmore. Information about art authentication. Legal requirements for charitable donations. And then, how to commission a painting reproduction. I clicked on it. The page was for a service that specialized in creating high-quality reproductions of famous artworks. Their premium service, costing upward of $15,000, promised museum-quality reproductions virtually indistinguishable from the original. I stared at the screen. No, she wouldn't. But the pieces were falling into place. The reproduction commission. The authentication from a small institute. The anonymous donation. The aggressive bidding to make sure she won it back. $15,000 for the reproduction, $12,000 for authentication, $30,000 for the bid, $57,000 to launder a fake painting into their home as a legitimate charitable donation with tax benefits. But why? I kept searching. I found a folder labeled Mom's Art. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. All of paintings. Some I recognized from art history, a small Monet, a Renoir sketch. And there was Autumn in the Valley. But in this photo, the painting looked different. The frame was simpler. The colors seemed slightly off. And in the corner, I could see part of an easel and paint supplies. She'd had them all copied. My mother had commissioned reproductions and somehow gotten them authenticated and donated to charity auctions where someone would buy them back, creating a paper trail of legitimate ownership and tax deductions. I heard a car in the driveway. They were home early. I frantically closed everything, shut the laptop, tried to make it look untouched. I walked out just as my parents came through the door. Daniel! My mother's face lit up, then clouded with confusion. What are you doing here? I needed to talk to you, I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. My father looked between us. Is everything all right? No, it's not. We need to talk. All of us. Right now. My mother's face went pale. Daniel, I don't know what. The painting is a fake, isn't it? The words hung in the air. My father's eyes widened. My mother seemed to freeze. What are you talking about? She said, but her voice wavered. The Whitmore. It's a reproduction. You had it commissioned, got it authenticated through a small institute, donated it anonymously, and then bid it back so you'd have legitimate ownership. Am I close? My father turned to her. Elizabeth, is this true? She stood there, looking between us, and I watched as the facade crumbled. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes filled with tears. And she nodded. Oh my God, my father said, barely a whisper. I can explain, my mother said quickly. It's not what you think. I mean, it is, but there's more to it. Please. We sat down. My mother poured herself a generous glass of wine with shaking hands. It started 5 years ago, she began. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. At the gallery where I work, I was in charge of a consignment sale. A very valuable piece, worth about $75,000. The client was elderly, a widow who needed the money for medical bills. I was supposed to oversee the sale. She paused, took a sip. But I got distracted. There was an issue with another exhibit, and I didn't watch the paperwork closely enough. The buyer's check bounced. By the time we realized it, they'd disappeared with the painting. The gallery had insurance, but there was a clause about negligence. If it could be proven I hadn't followed procedures, the insurance wouldn't pay. And I hadn't. I'd cut corners. Oh, Elizabeth, my father said. The gallery owner gave me an ultimatum. Either I personally reimburse the widow the $75,000, or he'd report me and I'd likely face criminal charges. Why didn't you tell me? My father asked, his voice pained. Because I was ashamed. Because I'd screwed up, and I knew how disappointed you'd be. I panicked. I'd been handling our finances for years. I thought I could fix it without you knowing. So you stole from us, I said. I borrowed from our savings, gradually, small amounts that wouldn't be noticed. But it wasn't enough. And then I realized, the charity auctions. The tax deductions. If I could buy expensive items at auction, I could write them off. The government would essentially reimburse a portion. That's tax fraud, Marcus said. He'd come in during the conversation. He stood in the doorway, looking at our mother like he'd never seen her before. I know, she said miserably. But I told myself it was for a good cause. The charities benefited. I was just gaming the system a little. And it worked. Over 5 years, I managed to get back most of what I'd taken. Richard never noticed because I was careful. But that doesn't explain the fake painting, I said. She looked at me with shame in her eyes. The deductions weren't enough. I was still short about $20,000. And I couldn't keep making large donations without Richard asking questions. So I thought, if I could donate something very valuable but not actually spend the money on the original, I could get the tax benefit without the cost. You commissioned a fake, authenticated it, donated it under false pretenses, and then bid it back so you'd have a legitimate, expensive piece with paperwork to back up an enormous tax deduction, Marcus said slowly. Mom, that's fraud. Multiple kinds of fraud. I know what I did. But I was desperate. I couldn't see another way. And I thought if I could just get through this one last thing, I'd be clear. I'd have covered the money I took. Did you use my firm? Marcus asked, his voice tight. She looked away. A colleague of yours. Jim Patterson. I told him it was legitimate, that I wanted to remain anonymous. He didn't know about the rest. You dragged my firm into this? My reputation? Do you have any idea what this could do to me if it comes out? I could be disbarred. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to hurt you kids. I was just trying to fix my mistake. My father had been silent. Now he spoke, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard. By committing multiple felonies. By lying to me for 5 years. By putting our entire family at risk. He stood. I need to not be in this room right now. Richard, please. No. I can't even look at you right now. He walked out. We heard the garage door, his car starting. My mother sat there, tears streaming down her face, and I felt betrayed and angry and confused and sad all at once. I never wanted this, she said softly. I just wanted to fix things. But you didn't make it right, I said. You made it so much worse. You involved all of us. You put Marcus's career at risk. You committed crimes using our family reputation as a shield. What do we do now? Marcus asked. Over the next few days, the situation spiraled. My father came back but moved into the guest room. He'd hired his own attorney. Marcus was trying to figure out his firm's involvement and whether he needed to report it. And I was trying to figure out if I even knew my mother anymore. We had a family meeting, this time including our partners. Jennifer, Marcus's wife, was a paralegal. She laid it out clearly. The best-case scenario is that Elizabeth comes clean immediately, returns the painting to the charity with a full confession, agrees to repay all fraudulent tax deductions with interest, and hopes for leniency. She'll definitely face fines, possibly probation, maybe short-term incarceration. Worst case is that this goes to trial, everything comes out, and she faces multiple felony charges with serious prison time. My mother looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. What about the gallery? The original theft? That's trickier, Jennifer said. If you admit to your scheme, it might come out that the embezzlement was related to the gallery incident. That opens another can of worms. So I'm ruined, my mother said flatly. My father spoke for the first time in the meeting. We're coming forward. Today. My mother looked at him, fresh tears starting. Richard. No. This ends now. We're going to the charity, we're going to the IRS, we're going to whoever needs to know. We're going to make this as right as we can, and then we're going to deal with the consequences. Together. He paused, his voice breaking. I'm furious with you, Elizabeth. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again. But you're still my wife. We're still a family. And we're going to face this the right way. So that's what we did. The next day, my mother, father, and Marcus met with the director of the St. Jude's charity. My mother confessed everything, returned the painting, and wrote a check to cover the fraudulent donation. The director was shocked and angry, but ultimately more focused on protecting the charity's reputation. They agreed not to pursue criminal charges if my mother made full restitution and agreed to never be involved again. The IRS was less forgiving. An audit was triggered. They found not just the fake painting donation but several other inflated deductions over the years. The penalties and back taxes totaled nearly $100,000. My parents had to take out a loan against their house. The gallery where my mother worked was trickier. When everything came to light, her boss confronted her about the original incident from 5 years ago. He'd known all along that she'd been slowly embezzling to pay back what she'd lost, but he'd turned a blind eye because he'd felt partially responsible. He'd pressured her to cut corners in the first place to move merchandise faster. But now, with everything exposed, he had no choice. He let her go. No charges were filed, but her reputation in the art world was destroyed. Marcus had to disclose the situation to his firm. Jim Patterson, the attorney who'd handled the anonymous donation, was cleared of any wrongdoing. He'd acted in good faith with the information he'd been given. But the firm decided it was best if Marcus took a leave of absence while everything blew over. His career wasn't destroyed, but it was definitely impacted. His relationship with our mother became strained, almost non-existent for a while. As for my parents' marriage, I honestly didn't think it would survive. My father stayed in the guest room for 3 months. They barely spoke to each other except about practical matters, bills, legal appointments, court dates. My mother pleaded guilty to tax fraud and received 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and those massive financial penalties. But something interesting happened during all of this. As the legal situation played out, as my mother did her community service and attended mandated therapy, as my father worked through his anger and sense of betrayal, they started talking. Really talking, in a way I'd never seen them talk before. My mother had been carrying so much shame for so long, not just about the recent fraud but about the original mistake at the gallery, about feeling inadequate, about being afraid to disappoint anyone. And my father realized that he'd created an environment where she'd felt she couldn't come to him with problems, where perfection was expected and mistakes were unforgivable. It wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't some Hollywood moment where they hugged and everything was okay. It was months of difficult conversations, couples therapy, rebuilding trust one painful conversation at a time. I watched my father move back into their bedroom about 6 months after everything came out. I watched them start going to dinner together again. I watched my mother volunteer at a homeless shelter for her community service hours and actually seem to find purpose in it. I watched my father learn to forgive, not because what she did was okay, but because he decided their 35 years together were worth fighting for. Marcus eventually came around too. It took him longer, the professional impact had been real, and he'd felt betrayed in a way that cut deep. But his wife, Jennifer, helped him see that our mother was a flawed human being who'd made terrible choices out of fear and desperation, not malice. They started having dinners again, awkward at first, then gradually more comfortable. As for me, I had to reckon with the fact that the woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me about honesty and integrity, had lived a lie for 5 years. I had to accept that people are complicated. That good people can do bad things. That the woman who read me bedtime stories and helped me with my homework and showed up to every school play could also be someone who committed fraud. I chose to forgive her, but it changed our relationship. There's a guardedness now that wasn't there before. When she tells me things, part of me always wonders if I'm getting the whole truth. It's something I'm working on in my own therapy. It's been almost a year now since that night at the auction. We had Thanksgiving together as a family last week, the first major holiday where things felt almost normal. Almost. There's still tension, still moments where conversations die because we've hit a sensitive topic. But there's also laughter again. There's also love, complicated and messy and imperfect, but real. The painting, the fake Whitmore, was returned to the reproduction company that made it. My mother's confession had led to an investigation of them as well, and it turned out they'd been operating in a legal gray area, creating reproductions that were too good, that could pass as originals if paired with fraudulent authentication. They went out of business. My parents' study now has a different piece of art hanging where the Whitmore had been. It's a simple watercolor that my mother painted herself during her therapy. It's not particularly good, she's not a skilled artist, just someone who works in a gallery. But it's honest. It's real. And I think that's the point. The lessons from all of this are complicated. I learned that secrets have a cost, that they grow and metastasize and eventually explode in ways you can't control. I learned that desperation makes people do things they'd never imagined themselves capable of. I learned that redemption is possible, but it's hard and painful and takes time. Most of all, I learned that family is complicated. That loving someone doesn't mean trusting them blindly. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. That you can be disappointed in someone and still choose to stand by them. My mother made terrible choices. She committed crimes. She lied to her family for years. She put all of us at risk. Those are facts, and they don't change. But she's also spent the last year trying to make amends. She's been honest, even when honesty made things harder. She's accepted the consequences of her actions. She's worked to rebuild trust, knowing it might never fully return. I don't know if our family will ever be what it was before that night at the auction. Part of me knows it won't be, that we've crossed a threshold we can't uncross. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the family we're building now, with its cracks and imperfections showing, is more real than the perfect facade we maintained before. I still go to work and teach history. I still love my job, though now I teach with a different perspective. When I talk to my students about historical figures who made mistakes, who did terrible things, I understand in a way I didn't before that people are rarely all good or all bad. That context matters. That sometimes good people do bad things, and bad people do good things, and most of us are just stumbling through, trying our best and sometimes failing spectacularly. The St. Jude's charity auction will happen again in a few months. My family won't be attending. That tradition is over, another casualty of my mother's deception. But we're building new traditions. Sunday dinners at my place, where everyone contributes a dish and we actually talk about real things instead of maintaining appearances. Game nights where we can be silly and competitive and imperfect. It's not the family I thought I had. It's not the family I wanted, in a lot of ways. But it's the family I've got. And we're doing our best to be honest with each other, to face our flaws, to build something real out of the rubble of everything that fell apart. If you'd asked me a year ago if I could forgive my mother for what she did, I would have said no. If you'd asked me if my parents' marriage could survive, I would have said no. If you'd asked me if our family could ever feel whole again, I would have said absolutely not. But here we are. Broken, yes. Different, definitely. But still here. Still trying. Still a family, even if we're figuring out what that means all over again. The charity auction exposed my family's deception, but it also exposed something else, our capacity to survive it. To face the truth, however ugly. To choose each other, not because we're perfect, but because we're family, and that still means something. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if the trust will ever fully return, if the relationships will ever feel completely comfortable again. But I know we're trying, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can do, acknowledge our failures, make amends where we can, and keep showing up for the people we love, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That night at the auction changed everything. It shattered the illusion of who I thought my family was. But in the broken pieces, we're finding something more honest, more real, more human. And maybe that's worth something after all.